the most empowered person in this entire process has to be your operator. And when he's truly empowered with more information, we have to believe, and you've already invested in his capability building, in his ability to understand this data. Because the point is, you may have an operator who will be thrown a list of critical alarms from a very high-end machine. He does not know how to interpret them.
Yeah.
You've not provided him with that empowerment. Now he has to look at a supervisor. What do I do? I have this alarm. But the only thing you have to solve is for the life of operator and the life of machine, and therefore the product. When the operator and machine interact along with the material, you get a good product. Now these are the only three things which I need of the highest quality. Everything else is an overhead.
So, Prashant, what has been a bigger source of innovation for you? Is it necessity or curiosity?
It is so in my case, it is either curiosity or laziness or irritation, which
Yeah.
can also be restlessness. So the first is, and I'll take the last one first. So, like I said, I'm restless, uh, and or sometimes things challenge me, right? My basic thinking processes challenge. Yeah, why cannot I do it differently? Why is it this being? Why does it take so much time to do this? Why is this so complex? Why cannot we achieve this in a better way? Right. So then it is out of sometimes not being happy with where we are, and also often I experience that a system. Now a system would mean foremost people, and then the infra which the people are placed in. Right. The system is sometimes not aware of its own potential, and often it so happens that I'm able to see that the system is capable of so much more, but we're not. If you remember, in the coalition government there was this term called common minimum program, and
Yeah.
I was like, wow, these people have agreed to work at the lowest level of performance, right? And that's how they want to govern, right?
Right. Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
people all system also start performing at a common minimum level, right? And
Yeah.
one or two things, whether they're people or whether they are infra or whether it's technology or just sometimes the thinking, right? That becomes the driver of this common minimum program of a system. And it becomes
Yeah.
more and more complicated when more and more variables are added, whether it's equipment to different teams or different functions or different geographies and so on and so forth, right? So that often has been the trigger of short-term frustration, but also you take it through your optimism that we can do much better than where we are. Now,
Yeah.
there can be borderline. The worst thing which I could be is be a cynic in these times and give up and say, listen, this is how things are going to be. I'm inherently optimistic. I'm inherently a believer that we can all be doing much better than who we are and what we are doing. And we sometimes need a nudge to go to our, I will not even say potential, right? I don't think most human beings have
Yeah.
even scratched the surface of their real potential. But even if we were to leverage 5-7% of who we are, what we're capable of, most people would end up performing at 5-6 times level what they are doing already here. So that's largely the source of what I would say innovation. The second is grassroots, right? So you go to the grassroots
Yeah.
level, you talk to your operators, you talk to your team who are actually doing work, and they have the best and the simplest of solutions to what we leaders,
Yeah.
and this leader word is often used very generously or overused, right? The leader and leadership word. But the real leadership is actually there on the shop floor. It's just that we are not giving them either sometimes a voice or an opportunity to do, to lead. Right? And some
Yeah.
fantastic ideas often come from there. True innovation happens at the ground level. Uh,
Yeah.
and then there would be uh, laziness. And now, when I say laziness, doesn't mean you don't want to work, right? But you are trying to figure out well, this is taking too much effort. There must be a better and simpler way of
yeah,
doing this. And I can
yeah,
then divert the time thus created to something else. Whether it is equipment
yeah,
time, person time, a team time, but often I've seen that people have the boiling frog syndrome. They're used to a certain way of doing things, and you get into a system, you ask, why is this being done this way? And say, oh, this is how it is done, right?
yeah,
And I don't like the word low hanging fruits. I always joke that the low hanging fruits are, you know, are for passerbys. If you're not a passerby,
yeah,
then you'd better climb the tree. If you're residing in this tree, then you get on the tree, get
right,
onto the treetop, and pick up the best
yeah,
fruits. Uh, so that's who we are, and so therefore, uh, these are largely what would drive me, what would drive innovation in my mind.
yeah. No, that's an interesting and unique take, Prashant, and I could relate to the optimism that you brought into the conversation, the grassroots level thinking that's often uh, I may be ignorant, but I see often a bit missing. But no, I think it's really interesting to hear these insights. Continuing further on this thread, so I keep on reading a few books here and there, and one of the books I read a long time ago, I guess, was *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind*. I think it was probably the number one book at the time it got released, and you want to read it, right?
Anthropology,
And
yes.
it, I think somewhere it talks about the fact, it discusses the idea that uh, Homo sapiens, or the modern humans, they have been able to dominate the planet partly because of their ability to innovate and adapt. So how important do you see these qualities being applicable, first of all for a pharma company, and then to their leadership as well?
I think these are essential to any human being. The basic.
Yeah,
Uh, so, what differentiates us from animals, if I were to simply say, there are two things. One is at a sensory level, we can choose to respond, they will largely react. So, the time difference
yeah,
between a stimulus and the response, human being can introduce a gap. Better human beings will be able to manage that gap. But if you have a reptilian brain, as a human being, you will then still, if I push you, you will push me back, right? So you will
yeah,
immediately respond to the stimulus. Some other person will ask me, why have you pushed me? And then he will decide to respond, not respond, etc. So he'll introduce a gap between the stimulus and the response. Animals will normally not have that gap between the stimulus and the response. So that's one difference between animals and humans. Although I feel, as an animal lover, they're largely better than us on most counts, uh,
yeah,
animals than humans.
yeah,
The other thing is the use of tools. And the basic differentiator between animals and human beings is human beings picked up the use of tools. And
yeah,
therefore, the nearest who come to the use of tools would be apes, who are also able to use some tools with some limited uh, ability of proficiency. Now,
yeah,
the use of tools or the design of tools itself was an innovation, and adaptation to
yeah,
the tough problem that we were being faced with. So whether it's killing an elephant, you cannot do it with bare hands. So you invent a spear, or so on and so forth. So therefore, or you're trying to cut something, so you have stones being carved as chisels or knives. So the basic evolution adaptation to the environment started with the use of tools for humans. And the
yeah,
day animals learn that, we are in trouble. So imagine, a lion being able to create traps for human beings. Uh, certainly
yeah,
equations will change. Uh, whether it's pharma or any industry, I think the greatest
yeah,
progress has happened with change, right? So, and whichever company is able to be ahead in understanding and delivering on the needs of customers, whether unknown or known needs, right? Uh, like iPhone was
Yeah.
ahead of its time and it's still a fantastic product because Steve Jobs created a need for the customer that this is a phone you should have, you would like to have,
Yeah.
when there was no apparent need, right? So that is something is essential, I would say, survival today because you're not constantly evolving in today's
Right.
world, whichever industry you are in, your survival is at stake. So in
Yeah.
pharma, you know, the best progress has often come, and I'm talking of pharma in general, not generics pharma space, but by solving the
Yeah.
unmet disease needs of people, right? Uh, a lot of research, a lot of
Right.
investment is being done, right? R&D budgets of large pharma companies are immense, where they're trying to solve uh, problems. And these are life and death problems often. So that's what they're
Yeah.
doing, and companies which can do that are going to obviously win. So absolutely, you're bang on that. Innovation and adaptability would be at the core of any company, also pharma.
I want to ask you a couple of more things around this, but you know, you have brought in a really interesting, point about, uh, sometimes not only thinking about unmet needs,
Mm,
but also creating needs for you to not only survive, but also survive in the long term
mm,
via innovation.
mm,
And this is something which at least I think you have to be a true visionary to think about, okay, what problems I might face in, let's say, 5 years from now, and then start acting on them today. So I know where it comes from. It has just been my own personal belief that perhaps if we stay restricted to the unmet needs or the problems that we are facing, we'll probably be able to drive action more than if we were solving for creating innovation for the future. So really counterintuitive thought for me, but I can totally see where it
mm.
might be
It's a very
applicable.
fair thought. See,
Yeah.
uh, and that is what which would differentiate because I have this philosophy. I do not know right or wrong, but I believe that 99.9%, and again, just don't take this as a specific percentage, are people like
Yeah.
you and
Yeah.
I, people with average abilities, average gray matter, etc. Very, very similar in what we have been given by God. Uh, the balance would be divided into two parts. One, which are truly geniuses. And this would be people
Yeah.
like an Einstein or a Newton or Steve Jobs, etc. Uh, and then there would be some who the dice of the nature did not rule in favor of them, right? They might have been
Yeah.
born mentally challenged, etc., etc. They so they have their set of struggles, and the society obviously has to support them in overcoming these struggles. Now, what differentiates this large chunk of people like you and I, in my mind, is the ability to be a go-getter, is a difference in commitment levels. So that's one. Now,
Yeah.
so that's one. The other thing is that uh, most of us, and I would say 99.9, whatever that large percentage is focused obviously on solving the obvious, and that's itself a
Yeah.
plateful. That itself
Yeah.
is not an easy thing because, for example, cancer, we all know that cancer needs to be cured, and it has not been cured for decades, centuries, and people are working and investing on that. So obviously, absolutely, it's the obvious. Uh, but
Yeah.
the biggest money or value will get added where you have solved something which I never knew was my problem.
Right.
And
Yeah.
suddenly I say, wow,
Not the low hanging fruit.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the tree is also not visible. Forget it, fruit,
Right.
right? You
Yeah.
don't even know that.
Yeah.
So it's,
Yeah.
and then you suddenly start looking at the world differently and say, okay, I never thought, but yeah, I do need this. Uh, and that's where innovation would have happened. For example, when somebody was trying to solve. I mean, so one is, could we keep making better and better video cassette recorders? But somebody
Yeah.
comes and kills the industry itself and says, I will do it in a completely different way. So, was the problem statement, I
Yeah.
want to make better storage devices or I want to make better video cassette recorders? this would still be in the visible realm, right? But
Yeah.
designing a completely different phone interface was something that people didn't even know that, there's phone design possible this way, and somebody solved
Right.
it. Or I guess uh, for example, nobody thought at a point in time that I would want to be able to do ECG on my wrist,
Yeah.
but somebody was chasing that I want to enable you to be able to do ECG on the go.
Yeah.
Was that a visible need? I do not know. But somebody was visionary enough to say, and I do not know, maybe on this watch itself, X years later, you would be able to run all your blood tests. If
Yeah.
tomorrow maybe a helmet can do MRI, I do not know, because I would have never thought that a watch will start giving me ECG even 5 years back.
Yeah. Right. Right. No, I think that's an interesting way to look at it. And when I hear that, my mind immediately goes to something called capabilities. So like, even to run a pharma company, there are different capabilities that you have developed. You have developed a capability to respond to the regulators, to conduct certain kind of studies, uh, or maintain quality culture. So there are certain capabilities that you require to be successful in pharma industry. It could be different set of capabilities if you were operating, let's say, a space rocket company. So, and I think the example of ECG also points us to unlocking a completely new capability, doing ECG on your wrist via your finger, which I think technology might or might not have existed in the past, but I think somebody wanted to unlock a new capability for the larger good or larger profit of, whatever the motivation might have been. So this would probably bring us to the biggest emerging innovation at this point of time, and perhaps the biggest in the last couple of decades, which is generative AI. And using generative AI, we are now seeing unlocking of different capabilities that were missing earlier. And I can take a couple of names, and then you can perhaps add on to it. So we have been really good at doing quantitative analysis, quantitative reporting. But now with Gen AI, qualitative reporting has become a lot easier and a lot more accurate. So we can tap into not only the database tables, but we can also tap into documents now. We can tap into, let's say, the change control data or the deviations analysis. So qualitative reporting as a capability now suddenly can be unlocked for pharma industry, which is kind of a new and better way of doing the ECG that we were anyways doing earlier. There are other capabilities like generation of text, which just takes a lot of time. The audience of this podcast is also quite interested to know what are some of the largest capabilities that, according to you, would be unlocked for the pharma industry as a whole.
I think the first for us uh, would be simulation. Uh,
Yeah.
Now, imagine if you were taking a flight and the pilot makes an announcement that welcome to the first engineering batch of this airline. And
Yeah.
99% people will get off the aircraft, right? Or this is the first PPQ batch. Uh, you know,
Right.
you will get off the plane. You're not going to fly it.
Yeah.
Now they're able to get the plane into the sky, and again, the accident safety issues like Boeing is currently struggling with, right? Which
Yeah.
shows how much of risk is involved in one small faulty design or a faulty part. Right? Now, in pharma, we spend a lot of time perfecting a product, right? And I feel that there's a lot of potential and I believe there's a lot of work happening, right? With
Yeah.
models being created, and can you therefore what level of simulation can you do before the batch actually has to be physically put into a machine and tested? So can you completely simulate a
Right.
formulation outside and then predict its behavior, predict the right critical parameters, process parameters, which will give the best CQAs, and then uh, go ahead correctly with the first commercial batch itself. And then you may want to call them validation batches, but really they would be, uh, and the testing itself should also be with a certain level of intuitive and Gen AI kind of testing, right? So you know what to look
Yeah.
for, because often what I've seen is, as we develop a product and we get experience with it, we start discovering either critical material attributes or critical process parameters which we never understood to be very, very impactful or relevant at the beginning of the product. Now,
Right.
these
Yeah.
are acquired learnings over time, uh, and can therefore AI help us interpret the product better in the first few batches and establish these invisible relationships between material
Right.
attributes, etc., which obviously mean that I will have to obviously try and get different lots with different CMAs to be able to
Yeah.
help the machine understand that these lots are different in these parameters, and therefore, what does it mean for the product itself? But can I do it not
Yeah.
on a machine, but actually simulating that behavior outside the machine digitally using AI? Then I say, okay, if this is
Right.
the PST, or this is the pH of this excipient, or this is the viscosity, etc., etc., how would the batch behave? What would happen at the
Yeah.
extreme ends of the RH or the inlet temperature, so on and so forth, right? So if I'm able to do that, right, then a lot of investigation themselves would become smaller, because for sometimes you have to do, when you run into a problem, the number of hypotheses you are able to come up with, and actually physical test is a limiting factor for sometimes a
Right.
fantastic investigation. And you want to do a fantastic investigation. So therefore, you are then working on the hypothesis, working on experiments, which delay your final understanding of the detailed root cause, kappa, etc. And for that time,
Yeah.
sometimes the patient doesn't have the medicine, especially if you are a large company, have a large market share. This process, and you obviously want to do the right thing, ensure that only the right root cause, the right kappa based next batch is taken. And that too is then
Right.
tested for its kappa effectiveness before you start shipping out the commercial product. So I think they
Yeah.
are some of the biggest opportunities uh, lie in how much of simulation can we start doing, playing virtually with different APIs, different excipients, different formulations using AI, and are able to simulate the right formulation, the right material attributes, the right CPPs, and start producing the batch state commercially. Which also that the same thing should lend itself to kappa, a better kappa for variability.
Right.
The the second would be uh, creating dark factories, wherein the
Yeah.
machine should be self-learning, and depending on the granulometry, for example, right, are able to then the compression machine is able to then fine-tune itself completely, so on and so forth.
Right.
Then depending on the final, so if you have an ER product, right, depending on the pellet, if suppose it's a pellet product, depending on the pellet morphology, can then the coating get optimized automatically, so on and so forth. Now, with advanced sensors, etc., this should be doable, right? So
Yeah.
can you then really look at uh, continuous manufacturing, which are in dark sites, dark manufacturing sites, wherein uh, operator is not even touching the machine, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm talking about the basics like predictive maintenance, etc., would be at the bottom of this pyramid.
Yeah.
So, and then they would possibly lead to rapid advancements in personalized medicine, etc., etc. So, those would be the next logical outcomes of such level of automation. Uh, you mentioned things like deviation, etc. I think they're very important. Uh, Regulatory challenges would still be there, because my fear always is that human beings, some of us can be inherently lazy. Now, I mean this lazy in a lazy way. Uh,
Right.
and you often I've seen that when a report comes which has already been signed by two people, People just signing without actually having reviewed it while they're signing as final review done by, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
now when
Yeah.
it's an AI generated report, whether we would be committed enough, and we have to be driven by the sincerity of commitment and also understanding that this is for a patient. This is the plane which is going to fly, right? For that patient who is going
Yeah.
to consume that medicine,
Yeah.
it's the plane that he's getting into, right? It's as critical for him, that single pill. So,
Yeah.
so when this plane flies, will it fly safely? So when you're signing off the deviation, are you actually applying your mind to it? Have you challenged all the assumptions, hypotheses, etc.? So my fear is that if people become too reliant on this thing, okay, this is AI produced, this must be okay,
Yeah.
right? And then I'm not applying my mind. So that is where the tricky balance lies. And
Right.
organization would
Yeah.
need to design this human interface very, very cautiously, because I think I don't want
Yeah.
that, because see, eventually AI or whatever it is would depend upon the past data and how it has been trained
Yeah.
and how its learning is, and is that learning complete, but it cannot be complete. And I don't think there's always a product which you will have an issue with, which you never encountered. So the machine
Yeah.
has no past data on that. I do not know how powerful your general the Gen AI algorithm would be, whether, because eventually these are all trained uh, by data being fed into them, but also basis human
Yeah.
algorithms, human design algorithms. So that's one
Right.
thing which is gray for me. I do not have any answers in on my own mind, but I think that that's the right balance of Gen AI and uh, human intelligence. So artificial and natural intelligence, how will you balance them out is important.
Yeah. Yeah. And these are two broad horizontal capabilities which I feel can become applicable across the entire value chain. Prashant, we had this interesting times when everybody was talking about RPA bots. It was probably 5 years ago, and I think still to date I am a big fan of RPA bots. I
So are
think it
we.
just makes the work a lot easier. One of the capabilities it had missing was interpretation of data and reasoning with the data. So while it is really good at automating common workflows, interpretation and reasoning is something which human mind is probably better at. And or in other terms, whenever we do slow thinking, that's where human ability shines. And now if we combine Gen AI with that, we suddenly start seeing a new concept called AI agents. And
Interesting.
since you talked about investigations, let's take an example of an AI agent for investigations, and we can call it AI investigator. Now, if I may talk about an analogy here, so imagine that you are hiring somebody for investigations in your organization. You would look at somebody who has 10, 20 years of experience in the domain, and they would come pre-trained on some of the work that they have done in their life. And when they enter your organization, they start fine tuning them a little bit, that okay, now this compression machines behaves in this certain way, or there are some nuances around warehouse which I need to be careful about. So while they do come pre-trained with their 10, 20 years of experience, they still have to fine tune according to the new environment that they're entering in. I look at AI investigator or the AI agents in general in a similar way, where they are coming in pre-trained based on scientific literature, which is embedded into the LLM, most likely OpenAI or others. But they still have to do a bit of fine tuning. But that fine tuning, may happen on day zero using the past historical data available in the organization systems. It may also keep on happening over time. So overall, it seems like it's a very viable and productive concept. We know that we have to balance the AI generated content versus the human intervention at the end. We don't want to be too inefficient, or on the other end, we don't want to be too reliant upon AI. So I think there has to be a bit of a balance there. But overall, it seems like a viable and quite interesting and, to be frank, exciting idea to me. Uh, which all AI agents are you thinking about, which you will have going forward in pharma?
Interesting. I never thought of it this way. So first of all, I agree with you. The only thing is,
Yeah,
I would also be from a FME point of view. A pre-trained person is also having preconceived notions, and I've
right. Yeah,
seen sometimes people approach a problem with a preconceived solution, and the entire efforts are then to prove that solution which they already have in mind. That's a challenge because they
yeah,
might have seen the similar problem in the past years, and
yeah,
uh, but this time the root cause could be different. But it
yeah,
appears. So normally I've been trained, and I tell people always reject the first root cause or the first cause. It is not likely to
yeah,
be the cause or the root cause. But so that's a trap that hopefully AI will not get into. Because again, for I think a good investigation to happen, whether through NI or AI, it would need fairly rich level of data. Sometimes ignorance can be a fantastic aid to do a good investigation, wherein you go completely curious but blank, and you're looking at this problem with no bias of the past, with no burden of the past successes. Uh, I think the first and foremost for me would be a good training model for uh, people, wherein the model, and I'm just not thinking on the feet, right? So I've no, you've
yeah,
asked me a
yeah,
googly, and I've not thought through this at all ever. So imagine that
yeah,
I begin to ask you some questions as a interface, you're responding, and over that next 30, 40 minutes, 1 hour, I now begin to form an opinion of your system, of your learning areas and training needs, right? And
right.
then uh, the batches are now being fed into this with the purpose of not optimizing the product itself, but discovering your uh, training needs. How are you responding to critical alarms, for example, would be an
Yeah,
input into this model, right? The machine went down. How did you troubleshoot it? Did you call somebody? Did you do any basic stuff yourself? So the machine should know, okay, this person has this capability to troubleshoot this level of equipment, but he should actually do more. How did you respond to a spray nozzle malfunction? What adjustment did you do? The machine setting, how was it? Could it be? So then imagine that on a daily basis, I get a report, which is an AI-driven report of these are the things you should work on. And next day I tell you, okay, I see you improving on this. What I
yeah,
thought were gaps yesterday. So yesterday the machine setting is better than it was yesterday. And the boss is not judging you. This the machine is judging you, or the AI is judging you, and then therefore hopefully it's more palatable, not coming from the boss,
yeah,
but so this is one application which could be interesting, wherein I am able to then self-learn basis how the equipment is observing me handle the equipment itself. Other application would again be of onboarding people, which would be a subset of what I'm saying. That people come, right? So can I then basis how they're solving issues, right? Can I
yeah,
find out the inherent biases and help them be self-aware of those biases, right? So typically,
yeah,
I've seen people who will have a bias that, oh, this is a lab error, or this is not a lab error, this seems to be manufactured. And I say, have you've not even investigated. This is day zero, day
yeah,
one of the investigation, and you're already getting into very strong bias or hypothesis. I said, I mean,
yeah,
I'm an illiterate. My advantage in my current job is that I joined a job while sufficient I'm in the industry, but still as an illiterate. Or if I can use a more strong word, incompetent person. When I say incompetent, means I did not have these competencies in me. So it's a blank state, and
right.
I was happy to sit with people in my team and say, can you please teach me how this thing works? Or I
Yeah,
can go to a vendor and I can be at an FAT and I can absolutely admit, listen, I do not know how this machine runs. Please teach me how this machine runs. Right? For me, it's not an embarrassing question at all. Right? But for somebody with a lot of
yeah,
experience, can be an embarrassing question, although he may not even know how the machine runs. But for him, it's more difficult to
right.
admit than
Yeah,
for me it is. Right? So an onboarding program wherein the minimum needs of the job are there, and then uh, we're able to figure out that he has these biases, And I'm not talking qualitative jobs like uh, investigations, which means root cause understanding, so on and so forth. Right? Hypothesis, what kind of hypothesis? And that is where often we have seen the regulatory agencies not be the most happy with the pharma
yeah,
companies. They feel that we can do a better job in more lateral thinking. Did you explore this? Did you test for this? And I'm assuming that most companies are good and they don't want to simply beat the system. They really want to do a good investigation, but some are limited by the
yeah,
competence of some individuals who are doing that investigation, or sometimes not the competence, but the ability to think laterally. Now,
yeah,
computer is emotionless, right? So the computer will think the way you've trained the computer to think. Right? So it will ask for all the questions. So these are the two non-standard things, and then there would be the standard. See, because the challenge which I see with data is there's too much of data being thrown, right? For example, you're collecting all of this data from machines into MES or whatever is your way to collect data, and tons of data. Some CPPs are being thrown at you every second or every minute or whatever. Most people do not know what to do with it, and on an ongoing basis, right? And eventually, the machine is not going to hold your hand and make you do things.
yeah,
And in this, are we able to, have we been able to train people to use this data sufficiently? Uh, See, I don't think in pharma industry we have trained people in enough understanding of statistics or managing data, right? So it's data will always not mean that you will certainly. It's not like a coffee machine that you press a button and then you get a cup of coffee, right? Uh, what you
yeah,
will get in real life is beans and milk, and you have to prepare your own coffee uh, in real
yeah,
life. So what I feel is that I think the abundance of data for me is also a limiting factor, and it is simply it has the ability to confuse people with what to focus on, what not to
yeah,
focus on, and they can be very busy for the entire day trying to comprehend the gigabytes of data which has been thrown at them and not to know what to do with it, not knowing what to do. So I think that is
yeah,
for me
yeah.
an area to help people with capability building on interpretation of data, understanding data, because AI is not going
Right.
to solve all your problems.
Early on during our conversation, Prashant, you did talk about operators being a very critical contributor or component towards bringing innovation, but not only that, even running the entire place. And as I think commonplace operators ourselves, we are seeing the use of technology in our life on a day-to-day basis. We order food, we know that it will take half an hour to get to us. We, similarly, you know, I think on some websites, when I try to book a flight, it tells me, okay, this flight is often delayed by 25
Yeah,
minutes, or there's a 95% chance of this flight not, running on time. So we are all making small decisions based on the prediction of data in future. Now, when we talk about operators running the plant, uh, the question which comes to my mind, is there value in enabling them to get a hand on some of this data that, okay, this machine in a batch often runs into this kind of a problem, or there is often a 20-minute delay in getting the job done, or there's going to be a bit of change over time which whenever this product comes into play due to issues in cleaning or anything. So getting a hand on these predictive data insights, in my opinion, may or may not add value to the operator's life. It really depends on how people take it. So I wanted to understand your take on how are you thinking about this challenge.
first of all, the only part I will disagree with you is it may or may not make a difference. It will make a huge difference.
Yeah,
Vivek, you've hit a beautiful
yeah,
point. It's a very powerful point that you've made. And when we began this digitalization journey in my organization, what I realized was that uh, a lot of these specifications were designed to address my needs
yeah,
or the senior management needs. In senior management, as in my team, right, my immediate team, I said, you're getting it wrong. And the only thing you have to solve is for the life of operator and life of machine, and therefore the product. When the operator and
Yeah.
machine interact along with the material, you get a good product. Now, these are the only three things which I need of the highest quality. Everything else is an overhead. Now,
Yeah.
including myself, right? So for the patient, he would just want to pay for you. Coffee has been standardized as a customer, so the operator has been made redundant. Everything else has been made redundant, and you get only all thing is, I mean, the only thing is you get a standard cup of coffee every time, right? From the menu that you
Yeah.
choose. Uh, and therefore, I said, A, to the level possible, de-skill the process. When I say de-skill the process, as in do not leave it too much for the operator to do and interfere. So you should have a solid, good formulation. You should have a very, very well maintained equipment which will reduce the operator's job significantly. Right? When these
Yeah.
two piece of things are good, right? And you should obviously have well tested material which meets the correct specifications, so on and so. So when these three things are in place, hopefully the operator doesn't have to do too much of intervention. However, there will be circumstances in which he has to do intervention, in which case your inputs, the one that you said, are beautiful, right? So imagine, like you rightly said, the moment starts this, within few minutes, the machine has got sensors which is able to, obviously, it is connected to a laboratory information management system, which knows therefore the CMAs, and basis the
Yeah.
CMAs, he gets a first input that this is the likely behavior in this granulation process, right, of this
Yeah.
material. Look out for this, or when the coating solution has been prepared, this is the likely behavior of this. So, or this is the plume that I'm observing in the spray from the spray nozzle, and uh, be aware of this. So, this will be fantastic for the operator because the most empowered person in this entire process has to be your operator. And when he's truly empowered
Right.
with more information, we have to believe, and you've already invested in his capability building, in his ability
Yeah.
to understand this data. Because the point is, you may have an operator who will be thrown a list of critical alarms from a very high-end machine. He does not know how to interpret them. You've not
Yeah.
provided him with that empowerment. Now he has to look at his supervisor. What do I do? I have this alarm. But
Yeah.
why do I need to get to that? Why cannot the operator make that decision himself? Which means I need to have the correctly qualified, correctly paid, very importantly, and correctly empowered and competent operator on that machine. So you have a machine which may cost you $1 million, but you're trying to save on the operator's salary by not having the right operator then. So then
Right.
you're
No, I think
doing
that's a beautiful point. Yeah.
so you raise a very, very important point, and yes, if the operators, it is, see, a pilot is also an operator,
Right.
right? He's just
Yeah.
flying a more expensive equipment, but eventually he is an individual contributor, just like an operator is an individual contributor. Both are operating an equipment. That's it.
Yeah.
Now my operator will impact more lives than the pilot, because my operator
Right.
will make a batch which may have 1, 2, 3, 4 million tablets,
Yeah.
which will go to hundreds and thousands of patients, and the pilot will impact at that time 3, 4, 5, 600 lives. So both
Right.
have lives in their hands, and both. And a pilot is trained like mad, right? I mean, they're trained extremely well. They're
Yeah.
retrained, recertified, recertified, and they have to meet certain health criteria before they can fly the plane, right? No alcohol. You should have had
Yeah.
this much of sleep, this much of rest. So my operator, who is doing an equally, if not more critical job of saving lives, they need to be invested in.
Yeah. Quite a unique analogy, and I can totally relate to it. I don't know how other people might react, but I think both have lives in their hands. Makes sense. So, Prashant, do you have 5 extra minutes if we
A
overrun the
max of
time?
five because I have a next meeting coming in, but yeah, please, 5 minutes is fine. Thank you.
Okay. I wanted to touch upon a concept called all-time audit readiness. So, pharma being a highly regulated industry, while we want to maximize the efficiency. We want to continue to innovate. We also want to cover our basics and make sure that we are doing all the right things. And one of the ways to do that would be to just stay all time audit ready. What does it mean to you, and how can companies prepare themselves to stay audit ready at all times?
So the term itself, it's like a paradox, right? So you don't need to be all-time audit ready. You just need to be doing what you should be doing all the time, whether it's for audit,
Yeah,
or whether it's for the visit of the chairman of the company, or whether it's for the visit of a patient who wants to see, can you show me where my medicine is being made, right? Just like if your car is being repaired, you would like to see where the car is being repaired. The customer can just walk in,
yeah,
right? And you, so I think if you're doing it with the purpose of regulator scrutiny, then you're getting it wrong. Uh, and that is where defeat is likely to come, absolutely. Because you're not doing it for the patient, you're not doing it for the operator or quality, you're doing it for the regulator. Uh, and I'm not saying the regulator is not important. They are very important because they work as a completely neutral eye whose only objective is to serve as a proxy for the patient to ensure that the patient will get the right product from your
yeah.
premises as it is promised. So they for us they're a proxy of the patient, and therefore why to use the proxy, but why not the patient in your mind itself? So I think
Yeah.
if you're working, and the answer is always in the culture, right? If you're able to create a culture, and the infra is an enabler. Of course, right? If I don't have the right machine, if I don't have a well-maintained machine, if I don't have a capable operator, if I do not have the right formulation, then everything else uh, is immaterial, right? The best operator cannot go beyond, a point with a ill-maintained machine, right? Or a bad formulation, right? So you need all of them in place, and once you have all of them in place, then you are ready for delivering the right product. If a regulator walks in, most welcome.
So, Prashant, thank you so much for this chat today. It has been, a great experience. Your humility is contagious, and I look forward to many more interactions with you in future. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Vivek. Thanks a lot. God bless you.